Michiel de Ruyter was born into a family of modest means on March 24, 1607, in the city of Vlissingen in the Netherlands. His father was a sailor and later a beer carrier, which left the family with little money. However, their family found strength in their faith in the Protestant Church, which guided de Ruyter throughout the rest of his life. For almost 60 years, de Ruyter's exploits at sea allowed him to be considered as one of the greatest admirals of all time. His brilliant naval victories in the service of the Dutch Republic made him a national hero, and also a beloved figure to those who served underneath him. He is also remembered as a courageous and fearless leader, constantly placing himself in danger from intense fire from savage close-quarters naval combat. Growing up in a port city, he is first understood to have went on his first sea voyage at the age of 11 to Brazil, staying abroad for a year and learning as much as he could about life aboard a seafaring vessel. At the age of 15 in 1622, he joined the armed forces and fought against the Spanish during the relief of the Dutch fortress of BERGEN-OP-ZOOM. As a deck gunner during the battle, he used artillery to bombard the Spanish forces besieging the city, causing many enemy casualties. Showing bravery at such a young age, he is also thought to have participated in an assault on horseback that eventually led to the relief of the city. After the siege, de Ruyter entered the maritime service as a petty officer for a period of time on a Dutch warship. He is believed to have been captured by Spanish pirates soon afterwards and taken to the border region between Spain and France. He managed to escape his captors with a few shipmates and remarkably walked back on foot the entire journey back to the Netherlands. Until 1631, he worked as a merchant in the Dublin office of the Vlissingen-based Lamsons brothers. From this time period comes a story when returning from a trip from Ireland, de Ruyter's ship was attacked by a group of notorious pirates called the Dunkirk hijackers that were operating off the coast of France. De Ruyter thwarted the pirate attack by smearing Irish butter on the deck of his vessel, causing the attacking boarding party to constantly slip and fall. He had his men remove their shoes and wear special socks that better grip the surface that was coated with the butter. The pirates became easy targets for the defenders, and the attack was repulsed. When his first wife died during childbirth at the end of 1631, and his newborn a few weeks later, de Ruyter decided to participate in a whaling fleet for 3 seasons. Proving himself a skilled sailor, he is made captain of his own ship in 1637, tasked with hunting the Dunkirk hijackers that he fought against years earlier. After successful operations against the pirates, he was commissioned by the Zeeland Admiralty and given command of a warship with orders to support the Portuguese in their rebellion against Spain. He took part in the Battle of Cape St. Vincent on November 4, 1641, as third in command of the Dutch fleet, which fought against an attacking Spanish squadron. The aftermath of the battle was inconclusive, and de Ruyter believed the incompetence and behavior of his commanders led to the result. Disillusioned by his time in the Dutch Navy, he left military service and decided to become a merchant trader. De Ruyter purchased his own ship in 1644 and became wealthy through trading from the Mediterranean to the West Indies. He routinely fought against the Barbary pirates and defeated them in numerous battles. His second wife died in 1650, and by 1652, he retired from the merchant service and married for the 3rd time. He had intended to live out the remainder of his life in peace and quiet until he was convinced to come out of retirement to fight in the First Anglo-Dutch War that had started later in 1652. The First War between the English and the Dutch marked a crisis in the long-standing rivalry between the two nations as leaders in world trade. De Ruyter finally had a chance to independently command a squadron of warships for the first time in his career at the Battle of Plymouth in August 1652. Although outnumbered close to 2 to 1, he defeated the English fleet that boasted some of the best sailors and gunners in Europe. The victory was unexpected for the Dutch, and the largely unknown de Ruyter became a national hero in the Netherlands. Serving under Lieutenant Admiral Martin Tromp for the rest of the war, de Ruyter participated in 5 more naval battles against the English fleet. Tromp died at the final battle of the war in August 1653, and de Ruyter was soon offered command of the Dutch fleet. Fearful that accepting the position would anger officers senior to him, he declined. He instead chose to become the Vice Admiral of the Amsterdam Admiralty. The war ended with a treaty in May 1654 with terms favorable to the English that also included major Dutch concessions. Off and on for the next decade, de Ruyter spent time protecting Dutch trade in the Mediterranean against the Barbary pirates. He routinely freed Christian slaves from the defeated Barbary ships, further enhancing his reputation. In July 1656, the Dutch joined an alliance with the Danish in the Northern Wars against the Swedish Empire. De Ruyter and the Dutch fleet sailed to relieve the besieged city of Gdansk on July 27th without any bloodshed. He was involved in a blockade against Portugal when he was called to battle against Sweden again in 1658. He led a naval relief force to liberate the Danish city of NYBORG from Swedish occupation in November 1659. In the battle, de Ruyter's fleet deployed amphibious assault troops and small ships that successfully attacked the Swedish-held fort. A few years later, these kinds of troops would officially become the Dutch Marines, with de Ruyter being one of their founding fathers. In 1664, he fought the English off the coast of West Africa and recaptured Dutch forts that had been taken earlier by the English. Crossing the Atlantic in 1665, de Ruyter was informed that the Second Anglo-Dutch War had begun. Sailing to Barbados, he attacked the English forts and destroyed shipping in the harbor. Turning north, he raided Newfoundland before crossing the Atlantic and arriving back in the Netherlands. At the Battle of Lowestoft in June 1665, the current leader of the combined Dutch fleet, Jacob van Wassenaar-Oudom, was killed. De Ruyter was asked again to take command of the Dutch fleet, and he finally accepted in August 1665. He led the Dutch to victory at the 4 Days Battle the following June in his first engagement of the war. De Ruyter's tactics depended on disciplined maneuvers to achieve victory against his enemies, but often his subordinates or fellow squadron commanders failed to follow strict orders. This can be seen when he narrowly avoided a catastrophe at the St. James Day Battle in August 1666. The Dutch were beaten in the battle, but de Ruyter managed to save the Dutch fleet from greater destruction with a skilled withdrawal. The Dutch squadron commander, Cornelis TROMP, was dismissed after the battle due to negligence for separating his force from the main fleet to pursue an attack on the English. The Dutch fleet soon recovered, and the following year saw the most famous and daring naval attack of de Ruyter's career in June 1667. The Dutch government wanted an overwhelming victory to end the war, so a daring raid on the English homeland was conceived and then led by de Ruyter. Sidelined from earlier in the year due to a serious illness, de Ruyter recovered in time to oversee the daring mission. On June 12, 1667, de Ruyter led a fleet of 60 ships into the mouth of the Thames River before going south. He took the town of Sheerness on the Medway and then sailed inland toward the dockyard at Chatham. The English were completely taken off guard by the attack on its home waters. The English had blocked the navigable channel with a chain stretched from shore to shore, but Dutch engineers broke through the obstacle fairly quickly. Beyond the chain, the English navy stuck in port was defenseless against attack from the Dutch fleet. De Ruyter's men burned 3 of England's largest naval vessels, 10 more ships of the line, and captured the pride of the English Navy, the 80-gun Royal Charles. De Ruyter towed the Royal Charles all the way back to the Netherlands as a prize. Throughout the raid, England lost 13 irreplaceable ships, while the Dutch lost 0. The raid on the Medway has been called the worst naval defeat in English history, and one of the worst humiliations it has ever suffered in its home waters. The English sued for peace soon after the battle, and the war ended with a Dutch victory in July 1667. From 1667 to 1671, the Dutch government forbid de Ruyter from taking to the sea due to his recurring failing health. However, the Third Anglo-Dutch War started the next year in 1672, and de Ruyter led the fleet to defend the Netherlands against a planned English invasion. The English, who were in an alliance with the French, attempted to blockade the Netherlands to keep the Dutch in their home ports. De Ruyter first encountered and surprised the Allied fleet off the coast of southeast England in June 1672. Both sides eventually withdrew after a costly battle. However, de Ruyter's show of strength against the larger combined fleet led the Allies to soon abandon their plan for a blockade against the Dutch. The following year, de Ruyter defeated the larger English-French fleet at Schönefeld in June, and again at TEXEL in August 1673. A large part of his success was that he was a master at fighting battles on his own terms. He would often separate larger enemy fleets into smaller groups, with skilled maneuvers. De Ruyter's tactical control of his fleet frequently kept superior numbers of opposing forces disengaged from the conflict, drawing smaller groups into battles where the odds were in his favor. The English were driven from the war by their costly failures, and with the Parliament refusing to fund the King's campaign any longer. They signed a peace treaty with the Netherlands in 1674, which left the French by themselves to fight against the Dutch. De Ruyter saved the Netherlands from a joint English-French invasion, in which some consider his greatest accomplishment of his long career. His brilliant naval victories in the Second and Third Anglo-Dutch Wars enabled the Netherlands to maintain a balance of power with England. De Ruyter sailed to the Caribbean to attack French possessions in mid-1674, but returned to Europe when his ships were stricken with disease. In January 1676, he commanded a joint Dutch-Spanish fleet in the defense of Naples at the Battle of Stromboli that ended indecisively against the French. 3 months later, de Ruyter clashed again with the French at the Battle of Augusta. During the fighting, he was mortally wounded in the right leg by a cannonball. Both sides withdrew from the battle when hearing of de Ruyter's condition. Clinging to life for a week, he died on April 29, 1676. On March 18, 1677, de Ruyter was given a full state funeral and was buried in Amsterdam. He is remembered not only as a brilliant admiral, but also as one of the greatest and most beloved national heroes in the history of the Netherlands.